the hashtag evidence for advocacy, hashtag voice for change, V4CP. You can also find SNV resources on evidence for food safety and post-harvest losses on www.snv.org, the library section. Kindly ensure to submit your questions, comments on the chat box, and also introduce yourselves in the chat box so that we know who has joined us for this very exciting webinar. We have an exciting lineup for you today. And without much ado, I'd like to welcome our sector leader, agriculture for Kenya and Burundi, and also program manager for Voice for Change partnership program here in Kenya, to give us some opening statements and to provide us with an overview of what Voice for Change program has done in Kenya and some highlights so that we can all know what Voice for Change is doing in the area of food safety and food nutrition and security and post-harvest losses as well. So without much ado, I'd like to welcome John Masinde to give us his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brenda. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar, and thank you so much for making time to join us for this particular discussion. We've lined up an interesting panel today. We're going to have an interesting discussion. And of course, the main objective today really is to be able to have an overview of the project that we've been running, Voice for Change, here in Kenya. For those who are not very familiar with the project, Voice for Change is a project that is funded by the Dutch government, running between 2016 and 2020. We are basically in our final year of this particular phase of funding. And the main focus of this particular project, it was basically evidence-based advocacy in terms of really enabling a conducive environment, really for engagement with various policy makers. In Kenya, we focused on 4 main themes, and it was basically food nutrition security, renewable energy, WASH, and resilience. The main, of course, we know advocacy is basically approached from different angles by different organizations. There are those basically who take the agitation angle. There are those who take basically engagement and influencing. This project basically focused on evidence. It was about research. It was about availing evidence, and that particular evidence becomes basis of engaging policymakers and trying to improve policies and formulating policies, but also influencing the implementation of the same to be able to improve the practice. The focus for Voice for Change basically looked at 4 different aspects. It was basically increasing CSO participation, their voice and influence in the public and private spheres, relevant to food and nutrition security, resilience, WASH, and renewable energy. We also focused on increasing political and public sector commitment in adoption of policies for all the target areas that we've mentioned above, but also inclusive policies and regulations and the corresponding frameworks as far as adoption for all the 4 areas is concerned. And the fourth also focus area was increasing budget allocation by respective governments. And this time we were basically looking at county governments, but also the national government. In Kenya, basically looking at food FNS and looking at FNS. Beyond FNS, we were also having other thematic areas, but today basically we are looking at FNS. And the main 3 organizations that were basically focusing on this particular thematic areas was SOCA, CATS, and SACDEP. The main role that was being played by these CSOs was consumer awareness. And the focus here was basically stimulation of demand for safe food. And the second focus was policy dialogue. The CSOs here, basically, they focus on initiating national and county level policy dialogues that would be able to bring different stakeholders around the different MSPs that had been formulated within this particular space. And then also promotion of public and private partnerships. The fourth one was basically focusing on evidence. As I've said, that the main emphasis for us as Voice for Change was basically evidence generation. And what these particular three organizations were doing was generating evidence in collaboration with the various think tanks and policy advocates that we're working with. For this project, IFPRI was our main think tank. It was the main research organization that led in the formulation of basically in the research endeavors, and basically being able to present scientific research that would be able to help us in terms of engaging with the various policy makers. I basically joined this particular project this year. That was around January, but the person I succeeded as basically was part of the people that started this particular project, and she's basically a guru in this particular sector. And I would want at this juncture to introduce Mary Njuguna, who was basically my predecessor, and currently is part of the global team at SNV, focusing on FNS. Mary, please, welcome for a few remarks.
Yeah, thank you so much, John, for that brief introduction of what Voice for Change has been doing in Kenya. So I'd like to bring on board Mary Njuguna to give us her brief on Voice for Change and the global perspective as the Voice for Change Global Advisor for FNS. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you very much, Brenda, for the introduction, as well as John. In my highlights, we'll mention what led to our choices in working with post-harvest loss and food safety in the Voice for Change project. Yeah. We think it is an important area, and of course, this comes, of course, is informed by national strategy. Big Four agenda focuses on the third agenda on food security. We think the two topics of food safety and post-harvest loss are critical for food security, and therefore it is a priority, considering also that the government of Kenya wants to achieve at least 100% food and nutrition security for all Kenyans, as discussed in the Agriculture Strategy for Transformation and Growth. And also, it is also a priority by other regional organs, African Union. If you think about the Malabo Declaration for food security and post-harvest loss is prioritized. And our initiative is also in line with what is provided within the SGDs. So in making this choice, we think it is important that various actors, private sector, government, and research institutions bring together their energy to support this very important sector. Bearing in mind also, we are coming from a context in Kenya where a majority of the Kenyans are living their livelihoods from agriculture, especially the smallholder farmers. We focused on horticulture and dairy, and the reason we did this because we had experiences in these two sectors. We were implementing the Kenya market-led horticulture and dairy projects. Both are big sectors, promising, contributing not only to food and nutrition security, but also to the economy. If you think about horticulture contributing about 36% to the GDP, dairy contributing 3 to 4% of the GDP. Therefore, they are important sectors. They provide great potential for the country and for the population. However, in our implementation of the value chain oriented projects, we came across key systemic challenges that prohibit the further development of these particular subsectors. And that is why we chose the two topics. We across the continuing challenge of milk quality assurance. It was a persistent challenge in the dairy sector, very limited consumer awareness on food safety. And you found that mostly it was the processors that could, in some situation, raise the concern. There was also, we thought, and we found a weak enforcement of quality regulations. And that's why we thought that this would be an important area. The same applied to the horticulture sector, which is highly fragmented and therefore hard to manage the value chain. On both cases, we found that most of it is oriented towards the informal. In fact, in both cases, more than 80% is domestic-led, and most of the regulations that are applied for external, especially the export sector, were not in application. So in this case, that motivated our interest. We also came across opportunities in the dairy sector. There were, in this case, an opportunity supported by the Netherlands government on milk quality-based payment scheme. A pilot was implemented with the private sector, and we began to see that there is potential for this kind of pilot to be upscaled and taken up by more private sector so that we can safeguard the sector. The same applied to horticulture. We worked with a pilot where we were looking at potato storage. We were looking at technologies that can support improved post-harvest management, especially in the potato industry. So with this, we were persuaded that we needed to work on those two and bring it forward for advocacy with the private sector and government and civil society. We saw that even if organizations like SNV and many others have worked for many years supporting the value chains, particular issues remained very systemic and could not be addressed by one-off projects. And that is why with Voice for Change, we have embarked on a multi-stakeholder approach where we bring on board private sector who can look at how they can invest in these particular elements to support, for example, with technologies that can support food safety, but at the same time also support post-harvest loss management. Public sector is the main partner on this project, engaging with the government to look at how we can change the rules of the game, how we can implement regulations and policies, and on the basis of that, bring more systemic and sustainable change. And the role of research, of course, was important. And therefore, the reason that we have this today's engagement, where we find that for government to be able to implement policies, they have to be founded on clear evidence and evidence that will and knowledge that will direct the areas in which they should invest. The role of civil society cannot be gainsaid. If you looked at the agriculture sector previously, we haven't been able to see so much engagement of civil society organizations. Civil society organizations have their role. They represent the voice of the masses. They represent the voices of the smallholder farmers. And they do have a role in participating in policy and budget making processes. And in this project, we've worked with civil society organizations to strengthen their ability to engage with government. And one of the things that we've been able to do is to build that partnership between the civil society organizations and research institutions such as IFPRI to be able to consolidate material. And therefore, the studies that we are going to show today, some of which have actually been shared with a couple of county governments, comes from work that has been collaboratively improved. I think it is collaboratively developed. I think it is important to note that civil society do have a place at the table, and with concrete evidence, they have been able to work together collaboratively with the government and add value. So we are inviting you to this session to listen to part of the evidence that has come that shows that we need to take action now. And our appeal to the respective government, this initiative fits into your agenda. It supports your performance. And therefore, please choose to take action. Implement the food safety strategies and policies that have been developed over the past 4 years. Invest in food system and invest in post-harvest management. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mary, for your words. And those are very pertinent thoughts to provide in regards to food safety and how Voice for Change has been involved in the movement towards ensuring there's food safety, nutrition, and post-harvest loss being addressed at the county and the national level. And as the name itself is, we are a partnership project, and this would not be happening without the assistance of the Embassy of the Netherlands. And with that, I'd like to introduce Rose Mackenzie, Policy Officer for Food Nutrition Security at the Embassy of the Netherlands, to give us a few words and thoughts on how the Embassy is viewing food safety in Kenya and how Voice for Change has been able to contribute to this particular agenda. So welcome, Rose.
Thank you very much, Gloria. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to join you today on this webinar. Online workshops and meetings have become the new normal, it seems. But this new normal might be having its new advantages. However, it's no replacement to face-to-face interactions during plenary or during tea or lunch breaks. But well, we'll work with this for now. Let me start by saying that food security, and specifically food safety and food loss, are two topics close to the heart of food security initiatives funded by the Netherlands government in Kenya. The Voice for Change partnership being among these initiatives is a good example. This is especially so since access to safe foods and reduced food loss are key factors in ensuring food and nutrition security at household level, community level, and ultimately at the country level. The focus today, as we've been told, is on food safety. As you know, we are concerned about food safety, especially in our domestic market here in Kenya. The export market, we can safely say, is well covered on food safety measures. Through the Dutch-funded initiatives, issues on food safety that we have grappled with in the domestic market broadly span across weak or inadequate regulatory frameworks, insufficient enforcement, challenges around incentive mechanisms, and low levels of awareness among all consumer segments. One of the initiatives funded by the Embassy, known as the 3R Kenya project, conducted a meta-analysis on transformation of the dairy, horticulture, and aquaculture sectors, which, by the way, are the three main value chains the Netherlands and Kenya focuses on. Among the insights and conclusions that were drawn from this meta-analysis was that a growing consumer awareness about food safety issues can trigger transformation towards more sustainable production and traceability. Now, the simple bottom line is that it is because of the consumer that we are concerned about food safety in the first place. And by the way, we are all consumers for this matter. Therefore, if consumers are the change agents, and their levels of awareness on food safety is what will tip the balance and bring about the change needed, then evidence generation is a requirement to demonstrate and substantiate the various aspects of food safety that the consumers need to be aware of and demand for. This evidence generation is key also for the policymakers and regulators and the relevant value chain actors for them to appreciate the food safety situation and respond accordingly. Equally important is the presence of strong civil society organizations that will pick up the evidence generated and bring about awareness through advocacy targeted at different segments of consumers, and at the same time lobby policymakers and regulators and the relevant value chain actors. I would like to acknowledge that the Voice for Change Partnership has worked with consumer groups to contribute towards raising awareness among consumers on food safety. It is work in progress, and one of the things that I would be curious to hear is how consumer groups can be used to track budgets for accountability and investments in food safety. In the end, the overall goal is that there will be unity of purpose from all concerned with ensuring and promoting food safety of the agri-produce, whether for international markets and or for domestic markets, but specifically for domestic markets, as here is where the challenge is. Now more than ever before, human health is currently on top of the global and national agendas. There is an emphasis focused on the need to consume nutritious food in order to boost one's immunity. We cannot talk of nutritious foods and fail to ensure food safety of what is consumed. Therefore, there is no better time than now to talk about food safety and the resources required for accountability and investment in it. Food safety remains to be a critical human right factor and a target to SDG 2 on zero hunger. Therefore, both the duty bearers and the rights holders must continue to put in effort to ensure that food safety is accessible, affordable, and adequately available. In the multi-annual country strategy of the Netherlands in Kenya, food safety remains a focus theme under the food security strategic pillar. And the embassy seeks to build on the work done by previous and ongoing projects on food safety, especially at the governance level. I will stop here and not take any more of our time. I look forward to the presentations and discussions lined up. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gloria. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Rose, for your presentation. And as we can see, it's quite clear that without partnership and working together with national, county government, and all other development partners, we cannot achieve what we want to achieve in food safety and nutrition. Without much ado, I would now like to move to our next segment, where we have key presentations from IFPRI and ILRI team, RESACS, who have done extensive research and provided evidence products for the Voice for Change partnership program to use to advocate for policy changes and for budget investment in food safety and nutrition. Our first, Dr. Paul Budiga. He works with ILRI RESACS as a senior policy analyst, and I'd like to let him share his views and share the highlights of the research that they've done on food safety and budgets. So Dr. Paul Budiga, welcome.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Good morning, everyone. I will be taking you through a presentation on food safety budget tracking, which I am sharing now. And I hope that everyone can see it. And the outline of the presentation, I will begin by giving an introduction, then make a case on why public sector intervention is needed in food safety, then why we need to track budgets, what are the desired features of a good budget tracking system. I will also present an overview of the budget tracking tool that we have made together with the CSOs and the government, county government, and the national government, provide some highlights of the budget tracking results and also give some conclusions. as a way of introduction, I think it has been already mentioned that dairy and horticultural products are a major food item among the Kenyan consumers. And the observable trends is that this is going to continue to increase. In fact, for example, milk consumption per capita will reach about 220 liters by 2030. We also know that vegetables are consumed regularly by every household actually in Kenya. Over 80% of production of vegetables is actually consumed domestically. It is also telling that the dairy and horticultural products are among those that are implicated in most of the food-borne diseases, and they're actually an important focus of regulatory agencies. So then the question is, when and where does this contamination occur? It starts all the way from the farm at the production stage. There could be issues of poor hygiene, for example, when you're handling milk. It could be use of poorly composited animal manure when you are growing vegetables, excessive use of pesticides and fertilizers. In urban areas, we even have problems of using untreated sewerage water, production on the roadsides in urban and peri-urban areas, among others. And the pictures there show some of these challenges. From the farm, as we transport these products to the market, there are challenges also of contamination. For example, we have seen vegetables being transported in open trucks that pass through dusty areas. Sometimes they use contaminated bags and also unhygienic handling. We have seen even the struggle with the milk, where it's transported using burnt plastic containers in motorbikes, etc. That does not stop even at marketing stage, where we have challenges with poor hygiene in our markets, where people sell along walkways and even in next to waste heap. So we have challenges across the whole value chain. So then the question is, why is public intervention required? Food safety has public, because if we are to leave it to the individual producers and traders, they don't have any intrinsic incentives to control any of the food safety hazards. They get their milk. If it's contaminated, the consumer doesn't even know and they sell it, that ends there. The other issue is that the negative impacts of food safety hazards, for example, foodborne diseases, reduced productivity, treatment costs, all these fall back to the public sector, because those people who will get sick will need treatment, etc. There is also an issue of information asymmetry, very common between buyers and sellers. For example, a seller of milk may have preserved it using, a chemical, for example, hydrogen peroxide or formalin, for example. They know, but the buyer doesn't know. And therefore, there is need for government to actually intervene to sort out that problem. So in essence, if food safety is left to the private actors, there will be underinvestment. We'll have socially suboptimal levels of food safety. So therefore, that is why we have the public sector coming in, establishing standards and control, investing in infrastructure and enforcement. And for this to happen effectively and at the best level, that is socially optimal, you have to have money to do it. You have to budget for it, and you have to utilize those budgets. And therefore, why are we talking about this budget? Because one of the challenges we have is the insufficient investment that leads to suboptimal performance, if you like. And therefore, you can already see that then we need to actually put in money, budget, and utilize that money towards achieving food safety, but also we need to track, because those who are responsible, both the national and county government, need also to be held to account for their commitment. And that is one of the theories of change in this Voice for Change project. And therefore, the tracking of food safety was identified as an integral part, and that is why we had this activity. And again, the political will for investments in any given public policy issue, whatever it is, must be reflected in not only the budget, but the actual expenditures. And I think we'll come back to this because the two sometimes don't align. Something may be budgeted, but not spent. And that is a challenge. The other thing is that, identifying and tracking this financial commitment is also a complex issue, as you will see, because food safety happens or is tackled in different ministries. If you think of it, think of agriculture, think of health, think of trade and industry, and many others. And there are so many projects and activities under each. And for you to be comprehensive, you want to bring all these budgets and expenditures together to get a full picture of what is happening. This method of budget and expenditure tracking has been used in other countries also by even non-state actors for advocacy. If you look through those examples that are presented there, it is actually used. Therefore, in this project, we borrowed from the international best practice, as IRI and IFPRI, working closely with SNV, the CSOs, and also working very closely and collaboratively with the county government and national government, developed a methodology for tracking our budgets and expenditure for food safety in both the dairy and the horticulture sector in Kenya. So what are the desired features of a budget tracking system? First, it should be comprehensive. As I said a moment ago, food safety issues run across different ministries, different sectors. And you want to ensure that that system of tracking captures all the activities in different sectors, in different ministries. For it to work well, there should also be timeliness. That is, financial information being available on a regular and a timely basis. I think for Kenya, we are doing well as far as especially budgets are concerned. Even county governments post their budgets online, the same with the National Treasury. So the budgets are available. But as I will say later on, the expenditures come with a huge lag of about 3 years. But at least for most of the counties and the national government, this information is available in a timely way. Then it should be made user-friendly. We have tried to do that. I think any of you who has looked through financial documents from Treasury or from county government, they are quite bulky. They have full of a lot of details and numbers, and sometimes it's difficult to use them. Therefore, a budget tracking methodology has to have some ease of use. So there should also be alignment and harmonization, and also ownership. The county government and the national government must see it as their own, so that when you present the results, then they can identify and say, yes, here we need to do better. So how do we operationalize it? As I said, food safety is multi-sectoral. You have to bring in health, agriculture, trade, water, everyone. And therefore, the question then is, what constitutes spending on food safety? You have to examine in details all the budget lines. So you start by the relevant budget activities in different sectors, in different ministries and even departments, like the Dairy Board or AFA, the Horticulture Directorate. Then there is the issue of some activities, some budget lines being very specific to food safety, and some others being not direct, but contributing to have, for the ones that are specific, then or you have to assign 100% of the weight. but others that run in between, you have to assign a proportionate weight. And how to go about that, as I will explain later, is an issue of expert opinions with the people who execute the budgets. It's an issue of consultation and also building consensus in terms of what weight would be appropriate to apportion a certain budget to food safety activity. So then, as I have been saying, you have to distinguish the food safety specific interventions and then the food safety sensitive interventions. They may not be direct, but as you build capacity of maybe the extension officers to communicate messages of food safety, there's an element there that you must apportion to 50. So then the steps include that we followed. Number one is to identify the dairy and horticulture food safety activities. And we look at the programs, and then there's a program level in how the lines are recorded. The second
Yeah, I lost Dr. Karugia for a bit there due to some internet connection. We'll try and get him back, but I think what we can do in the interest of time is that we can move to our next presentation as we get Dr. Gudiga back. And our next presentation is ideally looking. Oh, sorry, I think Dr. Gudiga is back. Hi,
Brenda.
Dr. Gudiga. Yes.
Brenda, I'm here.
Oh, thank you, Paul. I think we had lost you for a minute.
Okay, the food safety sensitive expenditures, we apportion, as I said, the budgets depending on the level of contribution to food safety. The other thing is to undertake consultation and get a consensus on the methods and the weights. So first within the relevant civil society organization, with the county government officials themselves and also the national government entities. And for our case, we took the tool to various counties and had consultations with the relevant people from different departments and build a consensus on the same. Some of the major challenges that still exist is the issue of coordination, especially achieving consensus on what to include, especially on the food safety sensitive budget lines. And also some technical challenges, which components and line items to include and exclude, and also the issue of the collection, how to make it more routine and more, if you like, harmonized, because different counties upload their financial data or budget data at different times. And for the actual expenditure, this is a challenge because it comes with about 3 years lag, because it has to be audited with by the relevant offices like the Auditor General. And actually the actual budget data is more, if you like, is better because it tells the actual situation as compared to budgets which express the intention. So how does our budget tracking look like? It's an MS Excel based, so it's easy. It's made user friendly. We sort of interface the underlying data with pivot tables, and also dashboards for tracking. And if you like, let me take you through a few slides just to see. We start with the raw data. Basically, if you pick this, the image is from the Excel sheet. So you'll find data from different counties and also from national government, different departments, different budget lines, and different amounts across the years. 4 years, about 75 budget lines, etc. So that is the raw data. Basically, getting it from the financial document and putting it in that format. Then you combine now, you sort of now, you combine the data, but still separate between recurrent and development. And then you have a bit more synthesized data. Then you move forward now, you create pivot tables and charts that captures the total budget for that county or the national government. Then you have the total dairy food safety budget, and then the total horticulture food safety budgets. And after that, you can begin to generate some results. For example, if you want to know by different financial years, how much do different state departments or say Ministry of Health or others spend for dairy food safety? You can be able to see, like I'm showing there, how many millions were spent. You can see who is doing the most and stuff like that. The other thing is that you can also now, over time, be able to track what proportions of the national budget, for example, are dedicated to food safety. As you can see over the years, there has been a general increase, but is still about lower than 1%. Here we are not making any judgment in terms of whether it's adequate or not, but already you can see a trend and you can see the levels in terms of the percentage of budgets. So from the tool, you can mine a lot of data. You can see the expenditures by department, by years, over time, and you can have a lot of discussion around what that data means. And that is what the CSOs have been doing when they have been engaging the county and national government as far as food safety budgets are concerned. And what we have learned from this tracking work is that using a collaborative, and I have heard that word used before here, what we are calling a triangle approach, where ourselves as the generators of evidence, working together with the civil society of an organization, SNV, and government is better than a linear way where one team sits somewhere, generates evidence, and just comes and puts it on the table. Where the others have not been involved and they don't understand them. Working collaboratively is better because all the stakeholders involved get a good understanding of where the data is coming from and what it means. Also, the issue of capacity building for the CSOs. You have to sensitize all the government departments so that they have the buy-in. And also, I think from what we have already been observing is that the budget that is dedicated to food safety seems to be low, and there is need to increase that, given that the challenges that we are facing in food safety are big and they continue to increase day by day. So that is basically my presentation, and I thank you all for listening, and I look forward to your comments and questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Paul Gudhiga, for that very interesting presentation. And indeed, we've seen from his presentation that there is a link between the kind of investment we're making in our budgets, both national and county government, and how this directly correlates or affects food safety. So our next presentation is from Dr. Vivian Hoffman, a senior research fellow with IFPRI, and together with working with Voice for Change project, she was able to do her own research and provide us with evidence to link, to show us how the state of food diseases is currently in Kenya and why we actually need more investment in food safety to address issues of food safety related to foodborne diseases. So Dr. Vivian Hoffman, thank you so much, and you can make a presentation.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, and thank you very much for including me in this panel. It's a great honor to speak with all of you today. I'm just going to get my slides up. Okay. So, as Brenda said, I'm with the International Food Policy Research Institute. I've been based here in Kenya for 2.5 years and working on the issue of food safety in Kenya for over 10 years. There's a lot of concern in Kenya these days that we hear about food safety hazards in the food system. And this isn't too surprising given what we know about how food safety evolves over time with the country's development. So typically, food safety scholars observe that more traditional food systems have a lower burden of foodborne illness. And this is because the food system is quite simple. Food is produced close to where it is consumed, and so there's not a lot of aggregation and opportunity for hazards to spread across large lots of food. Once you get to a transitional and modernizing phase of economic development, as Kenya is in now, you see the food systems becoming far more complex. And so there are increased opportunities for food to become contaminated as it sits for longer, travels further, and passes through a larger number of hands on the way to the consumer. What we typically see at this stage is that government starts to catch up with the need, as does the private sector. And so regulations start to be more effectively enforced. Capacity is built in the private sector for adherence to standards. And so you begin to see the food safety burden decline in this red phase of modernization, which finally brings you to the end where you have a postmodern food system and the food safety burden in terms of the economic cost is lower than it started out. Now, what's important to realize about this diagram is that it's not automatic. It is a typical case, but of course, the public sector and the private sector both have a lot of opportunities to improve how this goes. It's quite possible to stay in the yellow phase for a long time. And it's also quite possible to make this transition far more rapid. And that's what we're here today to talk about. How can we make this decline faster so that we have a lower burden of food safety, foodborne disease more quickly in Kenya? What we have seen is that in countries that do fund their food safety systems adequately, we see a much lower burden of disease. So this is data from 35 countries taken from the World Health Organization, as well as national statistics, which shows that countries that adequately fund veterinary services have a far lower burden of disease. This is the years of healthy life lost to foodborne disease that is transmitted through animal products, compared to countries where those veterinary services are not adequately funded based on WHO metrics. And turning to Kenya, we compared the shillings per capita that are spent on food safety according to the budget tracking exercise carried out by RESACS and ILRI against the estimated burden of foodborne disease converted from years of life lost to an economic cost by multiplying every year of life lost by per capita GDP. And so what we see is that both on a national level, where the food safety budgets are only around 265 shillings per person per year, and the cost of foodborne disease is over 2,000 shillings, as well as at all of the counties that we looked at, the burden of foodborne disease is far more expensive than the public investment to improve food safety. So this represents, I think, a real opportunity for action to cost effectively improve food safety in Kenya. We also did some research where we took nationally representative data on child diarrhea and looked at how that correlated with the foods that the child ate over the past 24 hours. So these are kids under 2 years of age. And we see, as usual, that children who are exclusively breastfed are much less likely to have had diarrhea in the past week. So this is basically 0, and you're less likely to have diarrhea if you are breastfed only. But those who consume some of the most healthy foods, such as milk, fish or shellfish, fresh fruits, these kids were also more likely to have suffered from diarrhea. And what I want to say here is not that children shouldn't be eating these nutritious foods. In fact, I think this result underscores that we really need to address food safety to make sure that the nutritious foods that children need to be eating are also not causing them to suffer diarrheal disease, which can lead to stunting and lifelong problems in health and also brain development. So just to close, the research that we have done through this project really shows that it is time for action. The government can do a lot here, the county government, the national governments, and also the private sector. I think the first step is to focus on the highest risk foods, right? So animal source foods, fresh produce. And I know the Ministry of Health is working on trying to develop a national food safety surveillance system, and this is a very important first step. Beyond developing such a surveillance system, which can help raise awareness and also create incentives for the private sector to deliver food safety, I think it's also really important, and the public sector has a role in providing or promoting, or both, improved sanitation facilities, hand washing facilities with soap, especially for use by food handlers. For example, in public markets, we need better facilities for people to keep themselves clean and keep food clean. And then finally, educating both food business operators and citizens about how to maintain food safety from farm to fork is a very important public role. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Presentation. And yes, indeed, it is time for action. As you've indicated, that the correlation between the investment that we're making in food safety and the burden that food safety-borne diseases are bringing onto our nation is quite dire. So with that, I'd like to introduce our next presenter, Professor Erastus Kang'ethe, who worked with the University of and working with Voice for Change program as well. They were able to do research and provide some insights into how Vietnam have been able to revolutionize their food safety system. And this definitely touches on to how we would want to change our food safety system. What kind of module do we want to introduce into our food safety system to ensure that making enough investment into the system and surveillance in place and learning from other countries that are similar to us, middle income countries such as Vietnam. So I'd like to welcome Professor Erastus Kang'ethe, provide us with some insights into the study, the case study that they did in Vietnam, and what lessons can we learn from a similar country on how we can also manage our own system and improve things. So Professor Erastus Kang'ethe, welcome.
Hello, Brenda. Thank you. Professor Kang'ethe is having difficulties connecting. I saw him online and then he disappeared. So I will step in and take this next couple of minutes to talk about the case of Vietnam, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So Dr. Joseph Karugia, who works with ILRI, will be making this presentation, as this is a study with Professor Kang'ethe and Dr. Joseph Karugia. So Joseph, welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Brenda, you can put up the slide. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joseph Karugia, and I work with an initiative known as RESACS, Regional Strategic Analysis and Knowledge Support System, which is facilitated by the International Livestock Research Institute and the ILRI and International Food Policy Research Institute, IFPRI. The presentation was to be made by Professor Kang'ethe, one of our foremost experts on food safety in Kenya, but he's not available at the moment due to some technical issues. So I will step in to his big shoes and share a few insights from the Vietnam case study that we conducted some time back, about a year or so ago. So from what we have heard, we can say with some degree of certainty that Kenya's food control system needs improvement to ensure that we have safe, wholesome food that is safe for human consumption and also is appropriately labeled and so on according to the existing laws. And to develop and improve this system, then we asked ourselves, what can we learn from a country that faced similar issues at more or less the same level of development that Kenya is in, and so on. So we looked at the Vietnam case and picked some important lessons that are relevant for Kenya as we work to develop a food control system that works to ensure that we have safe food in the country. So the first thing that you will want in this endeavor is really leadership. Leadership at the highest levels of government. In Vietnam, the Prime Minister's office prioritized food safety as an important national goal. In our case here, under the Big Four agenda, we have food security as one of the Big Four. We also, as a country, subscribe to the Continental Framework for Agriculture Development and Transformation, the CADEP and Malabo Declaration, which prioritizes food safety. And indeed, food safety is one of the areas that countries get assessed on during the African Union biennial review mechanism. And of course, food safety is important, as has been mentioned before, in achievement of SDG 2, Sustainable Development Goal number 2 on zero hunger, and Sustainable Development Goal number 3 of good health and well-being. So we need leadership that brings everybody who matters in this and create a mechanism.
I'm sorry, Joseph, I think we're having a few issues hearing you.
Reporting, you know.
Hi, Joseph. I think there's a few connection issues. Maybe if you could start off your point again. Yeah, Joseph, I hope you can hear me. We're having a bit of connection issues on your side. Could you kindly kick off your last point once again? Most participants could not hear that last point that you made.
Can you hear me, Brenda?
Yes, Joseph. Yes, we can hear you now. Please continue.
Sorry, so I was talking about the Vietnam developing a policy framework and regulations that clearly delineates the
Sorry, Joseph, I think we've lost you again. The connection seems to be poor on your end. If you can hear me, Joseph, the connection has dropped on your end. But we did get the point on in terms of the policy and regulatory framework that Vietnam designed, ideally to address food safety. Is it possible for you to share that point once again?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes. Kindly continue.
Oh, okay. Where did you want me to start again? I'm sorry, I didn't. Brenda, where would you like?
I think if you could just continue begin with the first point, policy and regulatory aspect of how Vietnam tackled food.
All right. Yeah. So Vietnam established a policy and a regulatory framework and delineating boundaries for the different actors in the food safety arena, eliminating redundancies, duplication of efforts, a clear reporting system, as well as, and therefore found it necessary to establish an overarching agency. And therefore that led to establishment of new institutions and resourced them. So you need new institutions that are well resourced and are fit for the country context. Then they went ahead and developed a surveillance, inspection, and laboratory capacity. So you need to put funds into development of infrastructure for surveillance, for inspection along the food chain, nodes and so on. And of course, laboratories for testing samples collected. Another important aspect is coordination. As you will know, and has been mentioned, food safety is multi-sectoral in nature. So there'll be different ministries, different departments that need to contribute to an effective control system. And these need to be coordinated. And this, it means that it cannot be left to one sector ministry. In Vietnam, coordination is by the Office of the Prime Minister, and there is an intersectoral committee chaired by the Deputy Prime Minister. Yes. And it's important to emphasize here that, coordination is not simply, occasionally sitting together and discussing issues of food safety. It's actually about joint action, continuous or repeated interaction by the different players, sharing of substantive information, and of course, taking action based on the information shared, including coordinating activities, budgets, and so on. The other aspect that they found necessary is capacity building programs. Of course, we need capacity, human capacity at all levels. The university programs, the teaching or teaching institutions have programs for training in the areas of food safety, but also need to build capacity of the different value chain actors. And of course, all of these would be anchored on a food safety strategy that focuses on the goals of safe food and food security, ensuring a working surveillance system, and of course, prioritizing where do you really want to focus on, because you can be everywhere at all times. You need to prioritize the food value chains and the relevant nodes to focus on, based, of course, on risk analysis. These are important lessons for Kenya, and if we could adopt many of these, we would be a long way in developing, go a long way in developing our own food control system that works for our context. I pause here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph Karugia, for that insight. And indeed, I think what resonates between what the presentations that have been made by Dr. Paul Gudiga, Dr. Vivian Hoffman, and Dr. Joseph Karugia is that we need to have some action, and not just review and create, but we need to have some joint action and repeated interaction with the stakeholders who are key to ensuring that food safety, our food safety system, has gotten to a point where it serves the nation holistically. So as the presentations have really brought together the discussion that we're going to have after this, which is a panel discussion with some very keynote speakers who have been very instrumental in ensuring that food safety at both county and national level are moving at the pace within which they're supposed to be moving. Vietnam case study that has been presented by Dr. Karugi highlight what we have tried to do within the county and national aspect, and the capacity building programs that both Voice for Change and international governments have tried to put into place. All this to happen, to ensure that we have a food safety system that works, requires investment. That is budgetary investment, both by public and private sector. And that is why I'd want to introduce our keynote speakers for our panel discussion today. And our panel discussion today is going to be twofold. We're looking at two areas. How is public and private sector going to invest in food safety? Are we doing enough in terms of investment in food safety? And if we are investing, how can we show this investment holistically? And the fragmentation of the Kenya food safety system. Is there fragmentation or is there not? Are we ensuring that we can coordinate stakeholders within the food safety system to make sure that all actors are working together for the greater goal, which is to ensure food safety for all Kenyans? I would like to introduce all our keynote speakers. First, we have from the Ministry of Health, Deputy Director of Public Health, Dr. Robert Kilonzo. We also have Deputy Director of Horticulture at the Ministry of Agriculture, Mr. Joshua Oliali. Third, we have a senior official from the Ministry of Trade and Industrialization. This is Mrs. Roslyn Mumbo. We'll also be joined by the County Executive from Nakuru, Culture. After that, we'll also have an IEA associate, Mr. Joram Gishiru, who has worked within the food safety industry and understands the ins and outs of food safety, and would like to hear his views on how Kenya is performing. We also have the chair of ASNET, KEPSA, Mr. Bimal Kantaria, Dr. Bimal Kantaria. We also have the chair of the Nyandarua Dairy Cooperative, Joseph Murega. All these keynote speakers will be joining us for our panel discussion, ideally to look at those two questions that we want to dive into. Is there enough public and private sector investment in food safety? And when we look at fragmentation in the Kenya food safety system, how can we address this fragmentation? So to kick off, our first to this panel is, given what has been presented by IFPRI and ILRI, linking how investment in food safety does affect how we can actually combat food safety, there seems to be a strong correlation. So the question is, has the public and private sector identified the need to invest in food safety budgets? And if so, how has this been done? I'd like to direct this question to Dr. Robert Kilonzo from the Ministry of Health to give us his views from the national level. Have you been able to invest adequately in food safety? And if so, how has the Ministry of Health done that?
Thank you very much, Brenda, for this opportunity to participate in this wonderful discussion. The earlier presenters, they have done excellent well in trying to bring the topic into the focus. Very good presentations from Vivian, good presentations from Paul, and the others. And back to your question, we need to realize that food safety is a friend to every nation. And therefore, you'll find that in most of the cases, food safety, the government will have a total interest. Because you don't get it right with the food safety, you don't get it right with the citizens. Because you need food for your survival. With respect to budgeting and allocation to food safety, let me say that generally, there have been two scenarios in country Kenya, before and after devolution. Looking at before devolution, the funding, I can say it was heavy on food safety. For those who have been able to look at the data which has been presented, if you could see before devolution what was happening, there was a bit of a high allocation on matters of food safety by the national government. That is the exchequer, that is the treasury, the money which is from the government. Come devolution, some parts of food safety were devolved, and other functions were left with the national government. And from where I sit, more of our interest is on the policy. More of our interest is on the law. More of our interest is on the guidelines, the manuals, and the protocols which we have to churn out for the use by both the government, the county governments, and all the actors within the various value chains. That is more to say of capacity building. But at the county level, the provisions of the Schedule 4 of the constitutions are so clear. And there's those mandates which have been taken to the county governments. And you see the Financial Management Act, it's very clear on the process of budgeting within the two levels of government. And therefore, there's a felt need that we need to improve budget allocation at the two levels, both at the national government and at the local government, at the county governments. As you saw, the case is the way the issue is currently, there are so many challenging priorities for the government. Like the scenario where we are in now, we have already finalized our budgeting for this financial year. There's what we have tried to propose for the allocation of for food safety. There's what we have been allocated. But always keeping in mind the current pandemic which we are facing, that is the COVID-19, and whereby in the event worst case scenario comes, there will be a lot of movement of funds from areas where they have been allocated into the current emergency. And that's how used to happen even before devolution. That whenever you have an emergency, definitely you have to save lives first. So all other things come second. First, you need to save life. And therefore all the powers and all the monies and redirected to the current emergency. That notwithstanding, there is what we at the national government, the Ministry of Health, we have been able to look into so that we have been able to achieve this financial year. And we have tried as much as possible to look into the coordination part of it. The scenario from Vietnam, and whereby you have been able to place food safety at the office of the Prime Minister, that is at a high level, yes. And like in the comments of the presenter, that the coordination does not mean it's just a matter of you calling for meetings and arguing here and there, no. But looking at common way of planning and implementing the plans. Yes, I can say we are almost there despite the so many actors who we are. For example, all the actors on food safety at the national level, we are now operating at what we are calling multi-annual national control plan. Through a support which we have got for the last 2 years from Denmark, whereby each agency, we have tried to work out our multi-annual national control plan. First, after agreeing on the principles of food control, whereby we are changing the philosophy. And in line with that, as a Minister of Health, what we have tried to pick areas of interest for food chains. This is with respect to the common hazards which are so disturbing us as a country. And in all the 4 chains, we are more concerned with the domestic market. We are looking at the fruits and vegetables, that is the horticulture. And this is with respect to pesticide residues and microbial contamination. Second of concern is cereals and legumes. And here we have the infamous contaminant, the mycotoxins, both fumonisin and aflatoxins, an area of concern. We again looking at the dairy and the dairy products. And here again is both microbial contamination and issues of mycotoxins, the M1s in the milk and all that. And the last and not the least is the meat. You look at the chain, the meat and the meat products. Our key issues of concern here is the fed drug residues and the misuse of food additives. So in a nutshell, as you can see the chains which we want to concentrate in for this financial year, which has just started because our financial years, they started from July, is almost driving at what the voice of change, the voice for change partnership is looking at. And therefore, as we see, we will not be having enough money to underhold this. And therefore, we are trying to loop in various actors who are going to support us to achieve this. I don't know whether Brenta have tried to give, in a nutshell, what we as a ministry, we are looking into. And before I give you back the mic, I want to say that the philosophy here with respect to food control is that we are changing the game. We are looking at a time whereby the responsibility squarely is left with the food business operator. What does this mean? It means you have to get enough funding for you to handle the capacity building of the food business operators. It means the county governments, they have to pick this. How will you capacity build the food business operator? Definitely, you have to let him know that he will be responsible for what is able to churn for consumption. He will be responsible for what is manufacturing. And for him to do that, you have to ensure that you give him the proper materials. You have to give him the correct manuals. You have to give him the correct guidelines. And for him to develop his own internal standard operating procedures. So that when the official control comes to make an evaluation, it's a matter of asking, can you demonstrate to me that the measures you're putting in place are able to address matters of food safety? And that is the philosophy which we want to change. And this is cutting across not only us from the Ministry of Health, but through DVS, through Kenya Plant Health, through Kenya Bureau of Standards, and all these organizations, national government organizations, and by extension, county governments, with respect to food safety. Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kilonzo. I think those are very pertinent points that you provided. And I like that you've highlighted that investment needs to be done both by national and county government, and that without collaboration at all levels of government, indeed, we cannot be able to tackle food safety, even when it comes to identifying where we need to invest. I'd like to throw the same question to the Ministry of Agriculture, Deputy Director of Horticulture, Mr. Joshua Oluyali, just to provide some insight into, as the Ministry of Agriculture, what kind of investments have you made in safety? Looking at that, we need monitoring and evaluation, investment in extension services. And as mentioned by Dr. Kilonzo, we have issues of pesticide residues, and that has been an issue that has cut across small-scale and large-scale farmers, which touches on investment and food safety. So, Mr. Joshua Oluyali, kindly give us some insight on what Ministry of Agriculture has done as a unit.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brenda, and all members. Good morning. Now, I wish to start by thanking Voice for Change for making it possible for us to have this discussion, and also for the awareness. It has continued to create among the special interest group, including government. I think it has been very important that we have chosen this method of evidence-based advocacy. We as government, we really appreciate the effort that Voice for Change has put in to ensure that some of us who didn't have information about food safety, we have taken a very keen interest, and therefore we are able to, we would wish to address those problems as raised by most of the presenters. So the problem I want to
Joshua, we seem to have lost you.
You have lost me?
It's working fine, it's working.
You can't hear me?
Yeah,
We can hear you now, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to say that the problem of safe food is actually in both domestic and export market. And our markets are really dwindling because of the problem of MRLs. And therefore, we are looking at this problem as a general problem, not just in a domestic. And then secondly, also, I would wish to assure Kilonzo that the Ministry of Agriculture would wish to hand over safe food to public health, so that we can manage it in food outlets when it's already safe. Because we know most of the problems in issues of quality occur at production and handling level. So what are these problems? I think it was mentioned by one of the presenters that we have this integrated small order production system, very difficult to manage. Then we have the responsible use of pest control products in management of pests and diseases. Then you have lack or poor post-harvest handling facilities and infrastructure. I'm sure many of us have visited our markets, and we have seen the way our food is handled at the markets. There is no capacity by SMEs, or what we call food business operators, in safe handling of food. And number 5 is low awareness. That is the reason for inadequate funding was because most government officers were not aware about the issue of food safety. But I'm sure with the increasing awareness, we are going to have more and more of budgets occurring, being done to be, for money to be allocated to food safety at both national and county level. So what are we planning to do? The first thing we are starting this year is to establish a market production and marketing clusters, so that we can bring all these smallholder farmers together to ensure that we're able to manage quality and safety of food. We are also going to have a baseline for all the food business operators, including knowing their skills and the gaps that they have in areas of food safety, so that we can start capacity building them on the same. Then we are going to undertake continuous sampling and analysis of foods at various markets so that we are able to assure every Kenyan and every person consuming our food, including our partners, that the food we are sending out of this country is safe. Well, last year, through the support with the Voice for Change, we were able to develop a food safety management plan. And it has been done, but what we are missing is that we have not completed putting on the figures. So we hope that once this is done, now we can be able to present it for funding from various sources, including government. And of course, most importantly, capacity building of food business operators is inevitable. When you talk about our transporters taking our food on open lorries, it's an issue of capacity. Do they know that it is dangerous to do that? And secondly, do they have resources to improve on those trucks? So during the trainings that you're going to have, and I'm happy that you're with the Minister of Trade on this panel, we want to ensure that our SMEs are actually have the capacity to handle the food in a safe way so that we can be able to ensure Kenyans of safe food. And lastly, of course, we don't lack some bad elements among the system. So those ones that will not be able to abide by the laws, then we have regulations to enforce as government to ensure that we have safe food. So I think, Brenda, in a nutshell, that is what I would want to assure the meeting, that as Minister of Agriculture, we are committed and we are starting the work as soon as this month. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Oliali. And I think, Dr. Kilonzo, you've been given the great task of ensuring food safety and safe health to the nation. And that indeed, of course, still needs a lot of coordination within the different ministries. And as we've discussed, counties need to indeed create systems that ensure there's indeed investment in food safety. And I'd like to invite the Chief Officer of Agriculture in Laikipia County, Mr. Mungere, has joined us. And if you could kindly give us an insight into how the county of Laikipia, and this would be ideally a representation of how counties are investing in food safety and coordinating with the national government to ensure that the people of your county are accessing safe food. Mr. Mungere?
Thank you, Brenda. And now the panelists and participants. Laikipia, just like any other county, we also struggling, we are only in the second term of generation of the devolution and government. But out of position with SOCA and SNV, we have been able to do a few things. One, we are in the process of we have done a pilot on livestock identification and traceability system. And now we want to roll out now for market. And this is essentially for beef. As you know, Laikipia, I would say, I think we are best in the beef in the country, if not in the region and the world. So we are using, the leads is in place, and we are working very closely with World Vision, and we are targeting traceability for beef, like we have seen in Vietnam case, farm to fork. And that is in the process. We hope by 2020, 2021, we have put in structures in place. The gadgets are in the process of procurement. And we want to do that so that we can be able to get safe food for the consumers all the way in the food value chain for beef. For crops, we have identified one is the tomatoes. As you know, tomatoes are grown by many of the small horticultural producers. And the bigger horticultural producers go for French beans. There's not much big problem there, but our problem is in the small scale for tomatoes. Laikipia is, I think, is number 1 or number 2 at the national level in terms of production. However, we have issues of the chemicals that we use. And these chemicals sometimes, they have a residue time and taken care of. But as you know, the producers sometimes don't declare and you may find some of these food get into the market even before the residue time is over. So we are working very closely with the SOCA and find out how we can sensitize targeted crops of tomatoes, French beans, onions, so that you can get them closer to the market. For the county involvement is that we are trying to put clusters, identifying technical officers in these areas who will be sensitized and be working very closely with the producers to ensure that the proper handling of chemicals that are used are proper ones. And we also make sure that the food goes to the market safe. So in this financial year, we, through the interest also for our governor, is that we need to do what we call water for production. We want to increase our irrigation capacity so that we can go to high value crops. And in this process, we hope now we can integrate the food safety in the production systems of the horticulture. And we are hopeful that through collaboration with SNV, SOCA, and ourselves and national government, and another key stakeholder, will deliver safe food to the consumer at the local level, national level, and at the international level. Thank you. Brenda?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mungeri. Very key insights, specifically from a county perspective. And I think we can't leave out, of course, private sector, because investment cannot only be done by public sector, but we need to see how private sector, who also form some of the food business operators, how can we ensure that as private sector as well, we're investing our budgets in food safety. So I'd like to invite Dr. Bimal Kantaria, Chair of ASNET, to provide us with some insight on how the private sector is currently investing in food safety. And as KEPSA, as a body that represents private sector, what are you doing and how are you working with the public sector, national and county government to realize the dream of food safety in Kenya? Thank you, Dr. Bimal.
Thank you very much indeed, Brenda. You can hear me properly? So thank you very much for this very interesting discussion on food safety.
Yes, you're very clear.
Thanks, Brenda. So I think it's probably the right time that this discussion has come up, and I want to thank the organizers for including at least private sector participation in these kind of discussions. I do want to also recognize some of our partners in government are here. I see from Ministry of Agriculture, I see Dr. Soka's here, and from the private sector from SDG platform. So a lot of our partners that we already work with at KEPSA already present on this webinar. A quick introduction on what ASNET is. ASNET is the overall umbrella body for agricultural private sector organizations, including all the various BMOs and value chains, research and educational institutions, as well as the development partners like IFAD and as I said, SDG platform. We're trying to bring everybody together in the private sector under the umbrella of ASNET, which was recently launched by CS Munia in February. And we've been working about a year on the organization. So it's become quite a good vehicle for all sort of agriculture related discussions to be under the umbrella of ASNET. And I'm happy that Soka and Jay and everybody are part of the team anyway. We've tried as much as possible in the private sector as well as in KEPSA and other BMOs like CAM to be have as much collaboration as possible with government and at county level. If you see the recent trend in the last 5 years, it's no longer about government versus private sector. I think we need to keep talking about how we as Kenyans can improve the system. And that is very important in the discussions going forward. A number of the speakers earlier on were government related, and I want to pass a message on to you that we're here as private sector. We are the sort of the implementation arm of what you as government put the policies out there. So where you can, we strongly encourage government to have associations with us lot in the private sector. That's why if you look at what we've been doing in the last 6 months, we formed very strong links with the Ministry of Agriculture. We now have a technical committee composed of ASNET as well as Ministry of Agriculture people chaired by myself and PS Kim Tai. We meet every 2 weeks, and a lot of the stuff that you were discussing today in food safety, some of these things on the agenda. And we found that just by talking to one another, a lot of these issues are resolved quite quickly. There's a great deal of suspicion between government and private sector on what each other's motives are. But I think once we get talking at a more of a national level, a lot of these issues we realize can be easily resolved. We also have a full-time technical committee with the EAC now, EAC Ministry under PS Kevin Desai. And an important resolution we now came out with, we formed a sort of a semi-permanent committee on aflatoxin, where KEBS and private sector and all the various departments related to aflatoxin now meet regularly. We had a first meeting a couple of weeks ago. We have a next meeting coming up. So just by us interacting with one another and having a more open-minded discussion on where the problems are, I think a lot of these issues can be resolved. So it's not necessarily how much investment is going into the sector, but how is that investment being used and is you use it correctly. So that's one of the messages I wanted to put across today. What we as private sector also have a big worry is sometimes how government works in silos. If you look at KEBS or Minister of Industry or Minister of Agriculture, sometimes all of these departments seem to be just focused on what they do. So if you look at really a horrible example was when we were discussing on maize flour 6 months ago. We were discussing with Ministry of Agriculture problems of aflatoxin. We met KEBS. Suddenly overnight, the decision was taken to ban a certain brand from the market without proper consultation. And what that did was just destroyed years of private sector investment in that brand. People became very reluctant to buy that product. But in life, we know that there are ways of handling these kind of crises, and you could have withdrawn them systematically from the market rather than just going wholesale and banning the whole product. So sometimes we feel in private sector that maybe whilst we want to collaborate with government, sometimes we don't see the reciprocity in that. Another very interesting example is an NGO right now from Germany who keeps talking about food safety and MRLs and agrochemicals and telling us we should be banning all our agrochemicals in this country because they're not approved in Europe. But that's completely unscientific. We've seen over the last 6 months, the matter was discussed at Senate Agriculture Committee, PCBB was involved, these permanent secretary was involved. So sometimes you have these kind of organizations which have, not necessarily a national view and maybe have a special interest in a certain subject. And that's the reason we are saying we need to collaborate with government. Government needs to talk to private sector as well, considering that we're ultimately all Kenyans. We're not here to hurt anybody or destroy our own market. Finally, I think the view is that there is enough standards in the system of food safety. Look at what KEBS have come out with. The systems are in place. There's no denying that. And government has actually been very good and very responsive to the concerns of the public when it comes to food safety. Of course, there is a formal sector, informal sector, and we can have a debate about which sector needs more regulation. But in our opinion, where the formal sector comes in, I think there's enough regulation in place from KEBS and Minister of Agriculture and Minister of Health in certain cases. It's a question of implementation and compliance of these kind of standards. So I think that if you need to put investment, I think investment should be put in two areas. One is in more education for these standards and compliance of them. And secondly, more investment in time and effort in working with organizations like KEBSA and CAM and ASNET, so that the wishes of the government, we are there to implement for you. I know time is short, so I'm gonna leave it there and say to our friends in government that we're here to talk to you. KEBSA has always been a very strong organization standing in partnership with government. KAM is there, ASNET is there. Use our BMO organizations to sometimes further your causes. But thank you very much indeed for allowing us to talk. And Gloria, and back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bimal, for your comments. And I think very key points that you've made. And I'd like to piggyback on your points, especially in terms of how government is working with different ministries, how that collaborative structure should be in place to ensure all ministries are on the same page when it comes to where are we directing our investment. And I would like to invite Mrs. Rosalie Mumbo from the Ministry of Trade to highlight, as a senior officer or official in the Ministry of Trade, how are you working with Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture, to really ensure that, especially like in the markets, clear investments are being made to sensitize those working in the markets and those working within the industry of trade? What are you doing to make sure that food safety is clearly being invested in and the investment is actually going to the right areas. Rosalind? I can't seem to get a hold of Rosalind Mumbo, but I think we can get back to her once she's logged back on. We do have someone from the Ministry of Budget. This is Mr. Samuel Masharia, and you work in the ministry which we would like to call the budget holder and controller of our investment in food safety, if I may say so. So Mr. Samuel Masharia, Senior Department Director of Budget, kindly give us your views on how does the Ministry of Planning and Budget work together with the different departments in the Ministry of Health and Agriculture and Trade to ensure that what we are investing in is directed to the correct areas or sectors that need investment. Mr. Masharia?
Thank you, Brenda. Participants, good morning. I think this is a very important topic. I think I've listened to the various speakers, and there's a case in point whereby we have to look at the food and nutrition security and safety. I think in the budget we have various items which actually reflect funding on this. But maybe what we need maybe is a bit of coordination. I think from what I've heard from the various speakers, I think we have various sectors. We have about 10 sectors, and these ministries do not belong to the same sector. So our budget cycle starts from July and ends in June of the next financial year. So I think what I think the federal stakeholder need to do is to participate in the budgeting process, because actually the government cannot fund something which is outside its policy priorities. And so the federal stakeholders, including the ministries, they have to participate in the budgeting process in the federal sectors. This normally starts in July, August, when we issue guidelines to the ministry on how to prepare the budgets. And then we have the federal sectors, like myself, I'm the convener for the agriculture, rural and urban development, where I think the issue of food security and nutrition falls. I think this is a part of also the Big Four agenda for the president. So I think if they can participate and actually are able to convince the sector that they need some money or they need some funding in some of these critical areas, I believe they should be considered. And I believe there are already areas that we have funded on food safety. If you look at the issue of aflatoxin, we have some funding on aflatoxin. We are doing also some laboratories, that is in fisheries. We have done some laboratories actually to look at the safety of fish that is being distributed to the citizens. And I think also we are funding like the data board and other areas. Further, if you can look at the budget, our budget actually, there are various areas, but I don't think they are coordinated. But I think it's something that we need actually to consult as amenities which are contributing to this agenda of food safety. I think we are ready, and I think this is an area that can be considered for funding. I think it's a critical area because actually it's also related to health. So if you look at maybe the costs that we're incurring at health, maybe we can be able to solve them under the issue of food and nutrition and security. So I urge all the relevant ministers actually to join us, maybe as we have already done the budget for the next financial year. but the budget for now, 2021, 2022, it will be starting in August. So I think we can have a discussion on how maybe we can join, and we can also maybe see how we can also engage other actors, the donors, and other partners who can help us in this, because it's an area actually which requires quite substantial funding. And as you are aware now, we have this, as the speaker from, from health said, that we have the COVID. If you look at the budget that we have now, and even the revenues that we are generating, and the competing needs, I think sometimes it's difficult actually to balance all these issues, but it's something that we can look at, Brenda. I think because of time, I think that's what I can say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Macharia. Very key points that you brought out. I think what I can really pinpoint from what you've said is there's a greater need to drive more consultation and investment with all the ministries working in tandem. I'd like to invite Dr. Immaculate Maina, this is the CC Agriculture for Nakuru, to give us her views on how the county of Nakuru County, Laikipia County, Nyandarua County, and Murang'a County. And the CC from Nakuru, Dr. Immaculate, can provide us with an overview of how, as a county, you've been able to actually invest fully in food safety, looking at investing in the food safety system, digital tools that can be used in the county, and also extension services, because these are key issues that I'm seeing even as I glance at the Q&A section. People are curious to know, how are the counties addressing food safety? How is the public participating, or the role of public participation in ensuring that there is investment put across to food safety? So Dr. Immaculate, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Hello?
Yes, Dr. Immaculate, we can hear you, yes.
Very good.
Yes, Dr. Immaculate, can you hear us? Kindly continue.
We continue to work around matters of food safety, but we are not where we believe we should be. Starting with the fact that we have a large horticulture production system and a large dairy production system, which are the two areas of greater impact as far as food safety is concerned, and as far as this conversation is going. I want to start by saying that as a county, we have emphasized lessons on food safety. We do not have a specific budget that is earmarked for food safety. And so what we are doing is to inbuild food safety aspects in our operations. And the way that we do that is that we always wish to have our extension staff sensitizing farmers on clean production, and also on the way that the food is stored and is taken to the market. Now, on the matter of production, we continue to emphasize that we use only the molecules that have been registered, so that then we don't have too high of the residue effects. On the matter of transportation, in the various value chains, we are looking at the example of horticulture. We still have a challenge because there isn't a criteria for what kind of vehicle shall carry horticulture produce. But for other value chains like milk and meat, we have We have the licensing of the containers where the meat is put and even the fish. The standards for transportation of milk, we have a challenge in the fact that we still have a lot of milk going on in plastic containers rather than the aluminum or the stainless steel. We are beginning to have a conversation on how we can move from plastic to stainless steel, but that's a difficult conversation given that it requires investment at the farm level for farmers to buy the relevant containers. We've had a conversation with one of the financing agents in the county to see how they can bring in financing for milk containers to our cooperative societies. That is an ongoing conversation, and we hope that it will bear some fruit in the coming days. Further to that, I would say that all of us in the county of Nakuru are very concerned with the safety of food because Nakuru County is the highest producer of food globally across all value chains. In Kenya, when you put it all together, an aggregate amount of food, a large amount of food is coming out of Nakuru County. And so we've gone ahead and we want to thank SNV and Agrify for the support we have received to be able to come up with a bill that has passed through the executive and is now ready to be tabled in the county assembly to discuss matters of food safety for the county of Nakuru. These are progressive conversations, but as far as resources are concerned, we struggle with that. We don't have specific budgets for it, and we continue to inbuild our food safety activities within our ongoing programming across the county. That's what I'll say for now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Immaculate, for your comments. And I'd like to bring back Mrs. Rosalind Mumbo from the Ministry of Trade to give us insights into how the Ministry of Trade is working with other ministries to ensure that food safety is maintained. Seeing that you handle one of the biggest dockets, which is the markets, where we get our food, fresh produce. So, Madam Mumbo, can you hear us? Kindly give us your views. Rosalind Mumbo, can you hear us? Okay, I think we'll get back to her later. I'd like to bring back the discussion to Mr. Joseph Murega. Mr. Joseph Murega is the chair of the Nyandarua Dairy Cooperative. And as someone who works directly with the farmers, as a former cooperative, as a chair of the Nyandarua Farmers Cooperative, kindly let us know, when in this discussion, investments in food safety, as a representative of the farmers, how have you seen the investment in food safety trickle down to the cooperatives at the county level? So Mr. Murega, kindly provide us with your insights. How have you as a farmer really seen the trickle down of investment down to the county level, at the cooperative level? Mr. Murega? We seem to have lost Mr. Murega as well, but definitely come back to him because it is key to hear from the farmers and how farmers are actually managing, how they're receiving investment in food safety. Maybe I can move to Mr. Joram Gisheru. Joram Gisheru is an IEA associate. This is the Institute of Economic Affairs and has worked within the Ministry of Agriculture and really understands issues that we're facing within the food safety system. So Mr. Joram Gisheru, if you can hear me, kindly give us your views as someone who's worked in the industry on how this has changed, how investment has changed, and how we view food safety. Mr. Joram Gisheru? In case you're muted, you can unmute yourself. I'm seeing Rosalind Mumbo is actually back. Can you hear us, Rosalind?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, Rosalind, yes. So kindly, we wanted to hear your views from the Ministry of Trade. How are you handling investment, especially handling a big docket such as the market where we get our fresh produce? Rosalind, how is the Ministry of Trade working with other ministries, and how are you investing in this particular space?
Thank you, Brenda. As the Ministry of Trade, we are so keen about food safety, particularly because it leads to a lot of rejection in the international markets of our product, and also the fact that it reduces human dignity when we see sickness of children and the public, the foodborne diseases increasing, and also the closure. We are concerned because it leads to closure of markets and closure of hotels and processing companies. So at the end of the day, if these businesses are closed, then our mandate for business development is affected. So to see how far what we are doing about the food safety issues in the Trade Department, we are seeing ourselves as the enablers of food safety because we know the health people, it's in their docket. But now at the market center or as Trade Department, we are concerned, number one, with trade development because food safety issues start when turnover is low. When retailers or wholesalers get product and they pay for a long time in a particular place, they rot and their value now decreases. So we think about issues that can bring quick turnover. And on that note, we do a lot about SME training. So they set proper strategies that can give them more markets and sales. And apart from SME training, we have focused on training processors in productivity and quality because they can get good raw material, yes, but if they keep them and they rot because of overstocking, at the end of the day, they produce bad product. So when we teach them on quality improvement and control and actually work with them at the shop floor, an activity we call on-site consulting, then we see they smoothen their production system, and at the end of the day, they get products with high quality. So that's a program we are doing with JICA to actually help the small and large enterprises. For the SMEs, we just do them as normal product through our Department of Business Training. Also, we have seen that most products get spoiled because of poor packaging, things like milk, things like even bread, flour. So on training of appropriate packaging, we find SMEs improving what they deliver to the public. Apart from that, we have seen a lot about labeling. So the Department of Weights and Measures have a department called KECOPA that actually train consumers to look at the date of expiry. I know majority we just buy things not knowing it has gone mold and it will affect our life. So we actually have the SMEs, the buyers, get to be sensitive about what they are consuming and demand for quality. And then now this upward demand will force the suppliers of this product, both processors and retailers, to give the right product.
Yes, I have unmuted.
Oh, okay. On that note, we actually want the consumer to demand quality products, and then
maybe there's a way of offering.
Okay. So do I continue? Number two is improving financing of SMEs. You find people would want to invest in things that make them provide quality products. But if they don't have money or accessing this money becomes difficult, it becomes a problem. So the Department of Internal Trade has been giving a finance called a joint loan board but which was devolved. And since it was devolved, it has never started functioning. Why? Because the legal framework had not been done, and therefore the counties just stopped giving. The money is there and cannot be accessed. So we are working on those legal framework to see to it that the county start giving out this money to SMEs who want to use it for business improvement. Again, we want to offer technical assistance to trade development officers because the bigger part of trade development was devolved, and now the county trade development officers are more in charge, particularly of the markets, the actual market infrastructure. So most of them are new, so they don't know the appropriate design for modern markets. And we have developed what is called the county engagement strategy, that we want to help them understand all these designs and build appropriate markets, that when products are put on it, it will not be affected. We have seen people eating bananas or vegetables on the floor or on the mud at the marketplace, and people are so unaware of the health hazard. They buy these fruits and eat immediately. So if these stalls are erected and allocated appropriately, we feel our public will eat the right food. And therefore, the market infrastructure with good cleaning areas and appropriate stalls can actually solve the issues we are seeing. So when we work with the trade development officer, we'll do that. And on the same market infrastructure, there is what we call stall allocation. You find few people get stalls, majority lack, and therefore they have to put their products on the floors or in muddy areas. So we are developing a guideline on how stalls should be allocated, and about to be completed so that our people are not affected. The same entrepreneurship development, we are thinking about strengthening the BMOs and the producer groups. So that is the clusters that are coming up, so that the leadership of this structure are sensitive about product safety. And on the same, some of them can be taught on actual food safety issues, and they can teach the other people. So when we capacity build the clusters or the producer group on food safety issues, we feel they will do it. And then apart from the entrepreneurship development, which is the major part of our work, we have an objective in our State Department of growth and development of wholesale and retail markets. Wholesale and retail markets. And when we talk about that, mostly we are thinking about the supermarkets. The supermarkets we have in Kenya first, and also the retailing markets we are doing in Kenya. Now supermarkets, we are seeing most of them are getting closed, unfair trade practices. And when they get closed, farmers will not find a place to sell their goods. So we developed what we call the word has disappeared. The code of practice, sorry, Brenda. The code of practice for retail sector is supposed to align the activities that are taking place with these supermarkets. So we are planned only to meet two counties and sensitize them on the code of practice because of limitation on funds. Last year we again sensitized to, so you see the capacity of trade department is large because we have staff, but the allocation of funds is little. So we actually meet very few at a time to spread this code of practice so that they do good business and therefore attract more business. Apart from the supermarkets, we are thinking about post-COVID issues in the retail sector, especially the informal sector. We are seeing a situation where this time now many people have gone to business. Some are new, and like Mr. Joshua had said, and they have very little business knowledge. So for these businesses to grow and not fall in their first birthday when we turn next year, we are thinking of a way to capacity build them to continue and also to look for spaces for expansion. There is another activity we do called business environment improvement. All these are to facilitate trade development. Now, how do we envisage to do this? We have developed what is called guidelines on principles of trade licensing. Trade licensing, you have seen how most business people suffer about paying license, and because they want to evade, they pile up the product. At the end of the day, the products reach when they are not in good condition. They rot and people consume bad products. So we have developed that, and we want to see to it that it starts, the implementation starts. Again, to ensure that more Kenyan products are used, the turnover to increase, we developed what is called a local content policy. And in this policy, we envisage a situation where the processors in Kenya will actually use 40% of Kenyan produce. And if this happens, again, we'll have created a bigger market. And this, it has been developed, and we have started implementation, getting reports, but there are some sectors who have not developed their own guidelines. So the process is a bit slow. On the international side, we want to improve access to markets, because when we visit counties that are overproducing, now we see glut, we see a lot in one area, and this, if aggregated well, can be exported. So to access the outside market, we are thinking about improving cross-border trade, and this again will have to capacity build the trade officers. So there's a plan to work together with trade officers at the border point, and even build an office, if possible, where now the international trade activities will take place. On top of that, there are more negotiations that are going on in COMESA, East Africa community, and other AGOA, so that we sell more outside the country. And if this succeeds, we'll open up more markets, and our business people will find a bigger market. So with that, I believe if what we have can flow quickly, then we will have even less stores, and therefore contamination will be less. These wholesalers can pick the product at the aggregation center faster, cross the border, and take them where they are needed. Because more of food safety issues happen because of overhandling. They leave the farm, they go to the market, this market to another market to another market. At the end of the day, it reaches the consumer when it is contaminated. So we believe with these activities and even more, which I will develop and send you in written form, we can actually help food safety issues reduce in Kenya. Thank you. Thank you, Brenda.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rosalind, for the insights. I think what I can pick immediately from your presentation is that a lot of capacity building is needed, and a lot of creation of awareness is required to make sure that we are all working together, even if the Ministry of Trade is investing in as much as it can in the markets, in the youth and entrepreneurship. How can we all ensure that we're working together to achieve food safety? I'd like to quickly bring in Nyandarua Dairy Cooperative Chair, Mr. Joseph Murega, because I think it's very key to hear from the farmers' perspective. How has the investment in food safety been seen at the farmers' end? Are you seeing the investment? And what would you want to say to the ministries that are here and to the county representatives that are here on how, as farmers, you'd want to be represented and what kind of investment you'd want to see in food safety to ensure that as the farmers from the ground up, we are collaborating with our implementers and our regulators. Yes, so Mr. Joseph Murega.
Thank you very much, Brenda. I hope now you can hear me. Earlier on, I tried to come on.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. I want to begin by thanking all the presenters who have made very good contributions and very, very insightful. I want to particularly single out Dr. Gudiga on the issue of the budget tracking. I think that for me was very critical, because a lot of times, government budget, but they don't spend on the same areas. So thank you very much for that. So to your specific question, let me begin by saying that as farmers, we have seen some effort from government in terms of helping the farmers to achieve food safety. If I begin with the dairy sector, I know the county government and also the national government have invested in provision of milk coolers, which of course milk coolers is a very, very integral part in terms of the safety of milk. But having so said, I also want to say that the need is still very high. There's still a very, very, very serious gap in terms of what the government should do in terms of assisting all the farmers to be able to chill their milk within 2 to 3 hours after milking. So efforts have been made, but I think there's still a lot of room that requires to be done. In terms of other fresh produce, I want to say that in terms of food safety, nothing much really has been done. There has been interventions attempted in areas of production and a bit also in areas of market access. But when I look at structures that you need to have in place so that you can guarantee food safety, then I think in terms of the food crops, which Nyandarua is also very famous for, then there is a lot of room, there is a lot of need for interventions from government to be done. I know currently I was looking at the county budget and looking at what specifically is there in terms of food safety. And I would say that there's need to increase funding towards specific for food safety. This is the areas of milk chilling. These would be in areas of storage, cold storage for fresh produce. This would also be in terms of training of farmers in terms of food safety. Particularly, one of the very serious concern areas is the testing equipment, the milk testing equipment. You realize that a lot of times when we say milk is unsafe, it is a question of, do the farmers and the cooperatives have the capacity to test the milk at point of correction? And the big answer is no. I give an example. If you want to test for antibiotics, the antibiotic testing kits cost about 100,000. And one test costs between 400 and 500 shillings. So when you look at that cost, it's not possible that the farmers or the cooperatives are able to shoulder that cost on their own. We need government to come in and other agencies to facilitate this kind of testing. Because it is only when you do this that then you can say you are giving safe milk in terms of antibiotics and other contaminants. But all in all, I want to say that all is not lost. We have hope that if all what the panelists have said and if all the interventions I've had can be put into place, then I think we can start moving. So you allow me to give a few suggestions that I think would help in terms of achieving food safety from a farmer's perspective. Number one, I think it is important for government to start working as government when it comes to issues of food safety. In a lot of times, what we see in government is departments working independently. But from the presentations that have been done here by Dr. Gonzo and others, I have seen, and it is a fact, that we need about 4 or 5 government departments to come together, form a multi-sectoral committee that you look at issues of food safety. Because one department will do, but will not be able to do end to end. So we need to seriously, for government to seriously think of that, both at national level and also at county level. Number two, I think in terms of budget, it is important to have farmers facilitated to be able to provide safe food to the consumers. And the only way to do that is first and foremost through education. A lot of education that we get targeting the farmers is on production, but very little in terms of food safety. So in terms of moving forward and also with the health challenges that we're having now, it is very, very important that we should have serious input in terms of food safety. And I want to say something also to Mr. Bimal. Thank you very much. I attended the Agricultural Summit where ASNET was launched. And I want to say that as farmers, we are very optimistic that finally we have a platform which is both the private sector and government, which can come in and probably make this dream of farmers being able to give safe food and also to improve production through the partnership. So I'm happy to hear that ASNET is up and running. We'll be looking forward to hearing more from ASNET, the Secretariat, and everybody else. So coming back to Nyandarua very specifically, is to say that I know currently we have a bill that is the finance bill that is going through the cabinet and then later to the assembly, and we only hope that these areas of food safety, particularly in terms of cold storage, both for milk and other fresh produce, will be taken as a top priority, because it is only if we achieve that then the consumers can be able to get good safe food. And finally, something came up very strongly initially about the need for the consumers to be educated on food, on safe food. I know Kenyans have the roadside mentality that when you sell produce on the roadside, it is assumed that it's cheaper or it's better. And I look at it every time I see the health hazards and the risks that go with that. So the consumers also need to, there should be a public effort to educate consumers on the need for safe food, and safe food cannot be roadside food. So I think that these are some of the interventions that we need to move into. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Murega, and very key points that you've provided. Ideally, awareness is very key. If we're even to champion for investment in food safety, we need to be aware of what food safety is and what we need to do to ensure we have food safety. And coordination, as you've mentioned, Mr. Murega, is key, and also investing budget to make the awareness very available to the farmers themselves. Finally, the last person I'd like to bring in before we have our closing statements from our keynote speakers is Mr. Joram Gisheru, who is an IEA associate, which is the Institute of Economic Affairs. He has great insights into food safety, the food safety system as it is, and you've worked very closely with the Ministry of Agriculture. And in closing, we'd like to hear your thoughts, hearing from the different ministries and also from a farmer representative and private sector. What are your thoughts on how we can actually increase investment in food safety, track our budgets, and make sure that our food safety system holistically addresses the issues that, as Kenya, we're trying to tackle? Yeah, Mr. John, can you hear us? Maybe if you can unmute yourself. Okay, I think we have probably lost him. So without further ado, I think I see him. Mr. Joram Gisheru, can you hear us? Seems we cannot hear your audio. Mr. Joram, can you hear us? Yeah, it seems your audio is not, we cannot hear you on your audio. Yeah, so I think maybe we can try get back to Mr. Joram Gisheru later. I'd like to move to the last section of this panel discussion, and I'll be directing this question to the panel, specific persons in the panel, and this is ideally on coordination. A lot of points have been brought out by all ministries and by our farmer representatives on the need for coordination. The need for coordination is very key. Without that, we cannot direct investment to the adequate sectors that need to be addressed, and we cannot coordinate food safety to adopt or even implement or ensure compliance for food safety. So maybe to Mr. Yeah, I think I'll go to Dr. Robert Kilonzo, if he's still there, from the Ministry of Health. Maybe in closing, your final statements and your views on coordination. With the establishment of, we had the NFSC being established, we have various bodies that have come up to try and coordinate food safety. Maybe in closing, what would you, as national government, how do we create that sense of urgency in food safety? And as a Ministry of Health, how do we ensure that coordination is not only secluded to boardroom meetings and sharing of ideas, but how do we ensure all ministries are going to work together and collaborate to make sure there's a sense of urgency in food safety and the challenges are being addressed as a whole, holistically, by all arms of government? So maybe if you can give your views, how, as a Ministry of Health and as a representative of the national government, how are we addressing matters of coordination and how do we move forward? What do you advise, Dr. Kilonzo?
Thank you very much, Brenda, and thank you earlier speakers for job well done. Let me say that coordination for us as a ministry is very important. Looking at the way the food safety matrix of the framework of food safety is in the country, because we are so many actors. You see, we have some actors who pick a specific part of the chain. There are other actors who pick a whole part of the chain. For example, allow me to give examples here. Look at Kenya Daily Board. It picks the entire chain. But as they pick the entire chain, you'll get the Ministry of Health as an interest. You'll get Kenya Bureau of Standards as an interest. You'll get Director of Veterinary Services as an interest. You'll get Director Livestock Production as an interest. But as a regulator, the Daily Board is picking the entire chain. And therefore, coordination here is very key. As you realize that we have been having the National Food Safety Coordinating Committee, which has served us since 2006. But we have tried to get out of the coordination whereby you're just calling for meetings, you have meetings, you want to make agenda items, and that's all. And what the National Food Safety Committee, Coordinating Committee has been doing is it has been working through subcommittees which have been formed for a specific function. For example, we had an issue with respect to mycotoxins, and therefore we formed a subcommittee of NFSCC to look into that. Now, as a country, we have tried to get out of this gentleman's agreement, which is not embedded in any law, and now we are working with what we are calling multi-annual national control plan. The way this plan works is that you'll get all these whom we call CCS, Central Competent Authorities, they have developed their annual work plan. And the annual work plan is completely interrelated with all the agencies. If I may give you an example, I'm privy to the work which was done in Laikipia through the Laikipia County and the DVS with respect to livestock identification and traceability. It is because that is part of their annual, multi-annual national control plan with respect to the elements of the DVS. That is just one of the examples I'm giving. So you realize that each of these institutions is having the plan, which has been developed with the clear principles on food control. Whereby, as I said earlier, we are changing the policy, or rather the philosophy with respect to food safety. So coordination will be very key, but it depends on how you really want to do this coordination. Sometimes we get a challenge whereby somebody may not be able to, what I mean by somebody, a regulator may not be able to to act with the speed at which we want to, for example, to control a specific event. And therefore, it's at that point we call for a physical meeting. So with the multi-annual national control plan, we'll have quarterly meetings and quarterly reports, which are supposed to be sent to the central coordinator, who is the Minister of Health, and in particular Kilonzo, who has been on this task. That notwithstanding, as a country, we are trying to evaluate ourselves. And we have seen that we need to update and review our policy of 2013. That is work which has been started, being led from agriculture and health, with respect to change of the policy and review this policy. We are privy to the developments with respect to the law and the bill and the food safety bill for the purpose of driving the food safety agenda for this country. And these are matters which all of us, we need inputs and collaboration to everybody, so that we can be able to get good documents which are able to serve us. For example, the policy, we are almost like there. It's only a few elements on the policy which are touching on the regime with respect to the food safety. Where will you anchor it? Only that. All the other aspects done and dusted. It's a matter of now throwing to the public for the public to give their comment. So that is, in a nutshell, the way, the coordination we are looking at. And as we wait for the policy and for the law, we are scaling up coordinations with the specific to certain food chains. For example, with the Kenya Bureau of Standards and the county government, the COG and the Minister of Health, we have already worked with a way in which we are going to handle matters with respect to release of laboratory results on mycotoxins, because we have been blamed so much. And I remember the comments by Bimal that you test, and from there you want to say, remove this brand out of the market, recall this, go and destroy that. We have already worked on it with a MOU together with the leadership of the Minister of Trade, and the PSS have been very clear with what the government wants. So very soon we will be able to see another approach in which some of the regulatory measures will be implemented. There will be a lot of coordination into that. And all this finally will be cemented when we come up with the food safety bill and a food safety policy to guide the nation. Allow me to just make one comment with respect to the domestic markets and what is happening. I've seen even in the presentations by earlier speakers, the way the horticulture produce is being sold in our markets. We have started thinking on how do we manage what we call the wet markets. Wet markets here, we refer to the open market. It's a common term which is used across the globe. And there's something we are working with together with all regulators who have a stake with respect to foods on display. And specifically here is Minister of Health and Minister of Agriculture through Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service, together with the support elsewhere, on how do we ensure that the government plays their part with respect to infrastructure, and we, the national government, play our part with respect to the capacity building on what is expected of that mama boga. You may find that that mama boga ideally is not aware exactly what are the dangers of displaying on the ground, displaying on just a canvas. She may not be aware of that, but immediately you will be able to build the capacity with respect to these business operators. You expect the the food business operators to comply. The food safety surveillance system, which Vivian talked in her slides, is something we are working on. We don't want to pick a lot which we can't chew. We are picking fruits and vegetables and also cereals. One thing I know, any business operator, immediately you are aware that you are being observed. Allow me to use observed with respect to surveillance. Definitely, it has shown that you are able to comply. I'm not saying that this is a system which we are putting in to see whom we are going to punish and whom we are not going to punish. That is not how the system works. The system will work by monitoring specific hazards. Immediately we find that brand X belonging to Kilonzo is having consistent measurements above the normal. We have a sitting with Kilonzo and we ask Kilonzo, this and this is happening. Can you tell us exactly what is it you're not doing right, yet we build capacity in you? These are the first initial measures which we want to engage with the food business operators. Because we have every evidence, unless you engage them, the running and the policing is not going to assist us. Taking you to court is not going to assist us a lot. Telling you to remove it from the market is not going to assist us. But we want you to change the thinking as a food business operator and pick up the primary responsibility on food safety and be able to implement the measures as prescribed by the regulator. Thank you very much, Brenda.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Kilonzo. I think you've answered most of the questions that I'm seeing on our Q&A section. Mostly looking at how is policy going to, policy implementation and management, really going to drive food safety in Kenya. And I think what you've provided would now lead me to invite Dr. Immaculate Maina to give us her closing remarks, specifically within at the county level. What is the county doing to ensure there's no fragmentation or to ensure there is coordination within the different ministries? I know most of the counties, Nakuru, Laikipia, Nyandarua, and Murang'a, have food safety committees in place that are acting as frameworks to ensure that policies are put in place and food safety system is being managed. So Dr. Immaculate, kindly give us your closing remarks and give us a view on coordination, how we plan to move forward as a county.
Thank you very much. I want to say that as far as coordination is concerned, it remains critical at the county level. We host many offices across various government departments. For example, in Nakuru, we have KFIs, we have KEBS, we have the universities, we have all manner of institutions working on areas of food safety. And so as a county, we are keen to have more conversations at the county level across all these various institutions so that then we can all think together. In this case, for Nakuru County, we now have in place our county food safety committee, which cuts across agriculture, health, and trade internally, but also is willing to work across all the other government institutions. What this has done is that it has enabled us to think more broadly. So we're not just having an agriculture view, but also bringing the trade and the health, public health aspects into a conversation. And to this end, we've seen benefits in this coordination because it's out of this coordination that we've seen SNV, we've seen CATS, we've seen SOCA, all of them working with us, Agrify, working with us on matters of food safety, and this has led to the development of the Nakuru County Bill on Food Safety. Besides that, I think that national government shall continue to support counties, especially on the matters of capacity building, to ensure that we are well aligned to the national thinking. I also like the point on the food business operators. This is a new conversation in Kenya. Our food business operators are not in any way organized. For Nakuru County, they don't have an association yet. That is the smaller businesses, the street vendors and so on. While the hotels have an association, the smaller food handlers do not have an association. And so in our current bill, we have borrowed heavily from thinking through the consultant, the SNV consultant, to begin to think about a food business handlers, a food business association, whereby these small handlers of food can sit together And of course, for many of us who've traveled out of this country and gone to more advanced economies, we have seen very clean and safe food in the streets of major cities in this world. That is a future that I think we should aspire to have, because it creates employment. There's opportunity for youth and women and other low-income people to actually offer a service that is clean and good for the people of the country. Now, my closing remark beyond that would be to say that we continue to see very good coordination. We continue to endeavor to better our conversations across the various institutions, so that then we can be able to give better services to the people that we work with. And I think that taking the example of Nakuru, I'm very grateful for the goodwill we have seen across the various institutions working with us in support of our food security, food safety bill. I must also say that the conversations on food safety, given the COVID realities, is very urgent and requires to be taken with a lot of seriousness. And we've seen also very good support from our legislature, that is our MCAs in the assembly, who are also keen to pass the bills on the food safety matters. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Immaculate, for your views on how the county specifically is moving towards ensuring there's investment and food safety systems are being I hope you can hear me. Yes, so we wanted Mr. Joram Gisheru to give us his views. I don't know if he's available to give us his closing remarks. Mr. Joram Gisheru. Okay, I think we've lost Mr. Joram Gisheru once again, but we will share his views on our Voice for Change blog. So with coming to a close to the panel discussion, I'd like to run through some of the Q&A and chat box, and I can see most of the questions that we've been asking have been answered, and most questions actually directed to the county and Ministry of Health, specifically looking at where are we when it comes to the policy, the food safety policy, and I think that was responded to by Dr. Kilonzo. Going to the chat, I'd like to maybe read some of the comments that are being made by our participants. Patrick Osodo here comments that, how do you address the issue of poor budget execution? It's the weakest link at the moment in policy planning and implementation and management of the value chain. It appears procurement and planning and executing departments are disconnected, while the structures put in place for oversight, including citizens, oversight of prepared projects, are not working. So I think this is a matter of accountability, and as has been put across by both the national and county government, this is an aspect of coordination and ensuring that there's accountability. So maybe to move to another comment, I can see Alice Kamunto. The government should seek to invest in other actors in the value chain if much needed awareness is realized. The government should propose to collaborate with CSOs to achieve the goals. So Alice Kamunto here is championing for the partnership with consumer organizations, partnership with civil society organizations, and larger business bodies, for example, ASNET, KEPSA, to ensure that the government is working together with other partners. maybe to select one more comment from the chat. Waweru Nyangi from the Nakuru Dairy Value Chain Platform. Improvement of infrastructure at grassroots level is important. For example, cooler boxes for border riders to improve milk quality and safety in the informal sector. I think this is in tandem with what the Nyandarua Dairy Cooperative Chair, Mr. Murega, mentioned, that we need to ensure investment is directed to the correct sectors and to the right people, for example, our farmers themselves. With that, I would like to bring a close to the panel discussion and the Q&A session. And the discussions that have been ongoing are all to lead to the development of a communique that the Voice for Change Partnership partners, the CSOs, IFPRI, and those who have participated today, national, county government, and every other organization, development partners, we want to bring in the action points that have been discussed today. As most speakers were alluding to, we need action and more action to make sure that the food safety system is actually operational and can lead us to the correct phase. So I'd like to introduce one of our major civil society partners. This is CATS. They will read to us the key points that our communique is ideally trying to drive through different points on how we can achieve food safety in Kenya. So I'd like to introduce Daniel Asher. He will provide more insight into what the CATS civil society organization does and provide us some key highlights on the communique that we are developing as a Voice for Change partnership. And this communique ideally is to be a representation. Everyone here wants to actually. Everyone here wants to actually. Welcome, Daniel. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Brenda, and good afternoon to all our stakeholders in the food safety, food loss reduction system. My name is Daniel Asher, working with Consumer Unity and Trust Society. We are a consumer organization working. Sorry, we are a consumer organization working on areas of consumer protection, and we have been part of the Voice for Change, looking in terms of addressing food safety in the dairy sector. Now going straight to what has been emerging from the robust discussion that we've been having, I think I would, is my screen on? Yes. Yeah, I would, with there? Yes. Now, in the interest of time, I think a lot has been discussed. I will just give a summary that we'll need to identify with in terms of what has been the direction we are taking as far as addressing the food safety and food loss reduction is concerned. We all agree that the dairy and horticulture sectors have a huge potential to contribute to economic development of Kenya. However, preventable losses and food safety challenges prevent the country from realizing the full potential of these sectors. The urgency to address the foodborne health burden, the cost of which greatly exceeds public investment in the food safety, also represent an opportunity. That is the emerging premium markets for safe horticulture and dairy products among the Kenyan middle class, who are already demanding a more diversified, nutritious, and safe diets. The fragmented nature of Kenya's food safety system serves as a barrier to reducing the foodborne disease burden and taking advantage of this market opportunity. In this particular discussion, very key way forward have been emerging, which we take as a recommendation. One being the need to strengthen collaboration between the public and the private sector. The strategic collaboration for the systems and policy changes that will enable stakeholders in the food system, the food safety system address very specific issues, including the limited awareness about the impact of contaminated food on the national economy, lack of systems for food traceability, lack of effective consumer voice and institutions, limited capacity of regulatory bodies, restrictive regulatory environment, insufficient access to information, limited interest of consumers on food safety concern, and a limited political will to address food safety and losses. The second is the need for increased investment on food safety by both public and private sector. Here we are looking at increased budgetary allocation on food safety and putting in place functional food policy to address safety, to address safe production, foodborne diseases, food handling, transportation, storage, and reduction of food waste. Assuring the public that food safety is not just a public good, but is integral to the achievement of development goals, including food and nutrition security, which is one of the key pillars, the agendas for the government, sustainable agriculture, economic growth, and enhanced livelihood. So the government plays a critical role in ensuring safe food in the marketplace. And achieving this goal requires increased investments in surveillance, in capacity building, and support for food business operators for a sustained period. And specific actions are requested here on the part of the government. One is supporting evidence generation to baseline to identify capacity gaps by all food business operators in a bid to addressing food safety and food loss reduction. Two, capacity building programs to county governments and to food business operators on safe handling of food. Three, systematic and transparent surveillance of hazards in high-risk foods. Four, documentation of and publicity of specific and sensitive food safety and loss reduction budget line allocation, and pronounced measures to safeguard consumers from purchasing substandard food products. Five, supporting consumer awareness creation programs on issue food safety and food loss reduction. Six is the transparency of budget process. Budget adjustments on food safety and food loss reduction allocation be prioritized as a standalone from the large allocation to the agriculture sector. Harmonization of food safety policies approaches by national and county government. And then the last is the instituting a phased approach where we have the short, medium, and long-term intervention in addressing food safety and food loss reduction at national and county level. We have further actions that requires all of us as stakeholders in the food system, and specifically, here we talk about the government, both county and national government, to address issues of policy surveillance and regulatory enforcement, and to provide commensurate specific budget line allocation for each of these, as well as the development of adequate water, sanitation, transport, and cooling infrastructure. To the private sector, to take note of market opportunities for the provision of safer food, and to cooperate with the government to meet the responsibility of all food business operators to provide safe food for their customers. Consumer groups, who are heavily represented here today, to take seriously their role in ensuring safety of the food they consume. And consumer groups here should actually engage effectively in budget tracking for food safety at both county and national level. Capacity development is key for effective intervention by actors along the value chain, and specifically in the following areas: improvement in good agricultural practices at primary production, hygienic handling practices, and enforcement of food safety standards by regulators in a manner that focuses on facilitating compliance. When you look at the above, they cannot be achieved without infrastructure, that is water, sanitation, transport, and cooling facilities. This needs to be developed to enhance speedy delivery to markets with minimum cross-contamination and spoilage. Now, we as the Voice for Change Partnership also make additional observation based on the discussions and then demands in respect to addressing food safety and food loss reduction in Kenya. Given that dairy is very key in the realization of the Vision 2030 and the huge potential within the horticulture sector, and also cognizant that Africa Union has prioritized agriculture transformation as a vehicle for shared prosperity and improved livelihood. We have come to the realization that investing in food safety is important for both health of Kenyans and for facilitating inclusive agricultural growth. through developing and ensuring access to higher value domestic and global food markets. And we take note that Malabo Declaration has placed high importance on tripling, I think I'm having, sorry for the interruption. Yeah, but then we take note on that Malabo Declaration has placed high importance on tripling intra-Africa trade by 2025. I hope you can listen to me. Yes. And that it is imperative to assure the safety of food traded. We take note that food safety policy at the global level is increasingly focusing on prevention of foodborne illnesses through capacity building and the private sector. So this approach is especially relevant for Kenya, given that limited resources for budget for the regulatory enforcement. Therefore, there is need for the Ministry of Health to come up with guidelines to urgently address the foodborne health burden as its costs presently exceed public investments in the food safety. On the basis of importance of food safety to the country, both in terms of health and economic development, we are calling for commensurate financial resource allocation, that is financial investment in the food sector, both by the government, county and the national level planning budgetary departments, and the private sector to help in dealing with the issues of preventable losses and food safety challenges hindering the country from realizing its full economic potential. We call upon the government to realign National Agriculture Investment Plan and the CADEP food safety indicators with the commensurate budgetary allocation for implementation of specific food safety activity program. We also call upon the government to address the fragmented nature of Kenya's food safety system, which serves as a barrier to efforts aimed at reducing foodborne disease burden and taking advantage of market opportunities for safer food. All stakeholders should direct their energy to ensure food safety policy is enacted to law. The policy envisages an effective and efficient food safety system that is geared to secure access to safe and quality food for all, thus reducing morbidity rates arising from foodborne illnesses or diseases. We demand a clear outline of food safety investment objectives properly aligned to the public-private partnership investment policies. This owing to the fact that there are only limited resources in terms of monetary allocation towards food safety, yet it requires greater investment and can be best managed through risk-based approach that harness consumer demand and private sector incentives. This particular statement, the communique, we are going to share this to all of us through a link. And sorry that you could not see the screen share throughout, but then all of you are going to have it. Thank you very much. And
thank you so much, Daniel, for taking the time to share with us the communique that we want to share with the entire team. Those who are participating would want to hear your views of the communique, which will be shared via a blog post. If you can check your chat box, there's a link to the SNV blog post that will contain links to the presentations and all resources and evidence materials that we've generated under the Voice for Change program over the past 5 years. So kindly check your chat box. And if you want to get more information or download any material, including the presentations that will be made today, kindly check the blog post that has been shared on the chat box. And with that, we come to a close of the webinar today. I'd like to thank the participation of both national government, county government, civil society actors, consumer rights organizations. I believe we also had some members of the county assembly present. We'd really like to thank the participation of all those who are able to make it. And for those following live on YouTube through the Farmers TV channel, and also on Facebook through Farmers Kenya, we also thank you. And for those who will be watching the recording, thank you for watching, and kindly ensure to share your views. And if any of your questions were not answered, do make sure to reach us on our email addresses, or you can share on the chat box how we can reach you to make sure that all the questions are answered. The communique will also be shared as part of the blog post, So you'll have a chance to also share your views on the pertinent issues that we've highlighted today and the action points that we want to take as public and private sector and as consumers ourselves. Please visit the SNV Voice for Change library for more resources as well at the www.snv.org/library or www.snv.org/updates, and kindly access the link also via the chat box. And with that, thank you once again, and stay safe, keep healthy. So thank you so much. You are free to answer the final survey at the end of this webinar. It will be shared on the chat box, so kindly make sure to give us your views. How was the webinar and what did you learn new? Is there a correlation between food safety and the level of investment that you're making? So with that, thank you so much, and we'll keep the conversation going offline with the counties and national government. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda and the rest.